A J-Mix exclusive.
Hello all, it's J-Mix here, and I'd like to welcome all my YouTube subs and viewers to part 2 of my exclusive interview with John Potash, author of the book, The FBI War on Tupac Shakur and Black Leaders. So without any further ado, I'm going to get into part 2 with John Potash. John, did you ever get to the point where you were in fear of retaliation for some of the info that you put out?
Well, yeah, sure. I'm constantly in different degrees of fear of that, but I guess my passion to get these ideas out there overrides my fears.
In your opinion, who is responsible for the death of Tupac Shakur?
The super wealthy and U.S. intelligence. I think they orchestrated Tupac's murder or assassination, whatever you want to call it, and they set it up. They had agents set it up.
John, you have stated that there were multiple attempts on Tupac's life. As fans, we only know of a few. Can you name these instances?
Well, it started when he first added wealth and fame to his radical activism. And now, at about 17 years old, he was elected. He was the youngest elected chairman of the New African Panthers. That was a group trying to replicate the Black Panthers. It was the young adult group of the New African People's Organization, which was started by former Black Panthers, former members of the Republic of New Africa. Now, Tupac's, stepfather, Mutulu Shakur, had co-founded the Republic of New Africa. Obviously, as I said, his mother, Afeni, was one time head of the Harlem Black Panthers. And so this young adult group, was the same age as the Black Panthers when they started in Oakland, California, with Bobby Seale and Huey Newton. So he was already ahead he was already a national Black activist leader at 17 years old before he even got involved with Digital Underground. Once he got involved with Digital Underground, he started getting some wealth and fame, and then he finally landed his album debut, and his single "Trapped" had a worldwide release with MTV, and that was a radical political song. And within several days of Trapped coming out, police stopped him supposedly for jaywalking, and they choked him unconscious and banged his head against the curb. And I found 2 other incidents in the news where people died in police custody from those same actions. So I argue that was the first attempt on Tupac's life. And the second attempt, I believe, was a drive-by shooting at the time of his when Juice's premiere. When he was driving in a limousine between San Francisco premiere of the movie Juice and Oakland, California. Third time was at Marin City Festival, and when strangers shot at him for no reason in front of police, and police failed to stop it or apprehend the strangers, instead just arrested Tupac. And fourth time being when after a concert he was driving in Atlanta, and 2 supposedly off-duty police officers with the third person ran at Tupac's car, smashed the window with the butt of their gun, and shot at him. And this is all, from eyewitnesses. I quote the Atlanta Constitution-Journal, our main newspaper down there, about this. And that's why Tupac got off, when he just simply rolled out the back of the car and grabbed his bodyguard's gun and shot back and hit them in the butt and back and legs. And I have eyewitnesses who I quote on this, and different other people.
John, the attack has been referenced as just 2 drunk off-duty cops who had done this.
People did argue that they were drunk. I argue that they weren't drunk, but I don't know for sure. But I do know what they did have was a gun stolen from a police evidence locker. And I quote other police officers saying that we call that a throwaway gun, that when you shoot someone unlawfully, you can just put the gun down so that it can't be traced back to you, because it's an unmarked gun stolen from the police evidence locker, so it can't be traced back to you.
Even with that being said, that they were perhaps intoxicated, isn't it a bit of a stretch to believe the government would use people in unconventional ways to perform this type of activity?
Well, I just don't think, I think the intoxicated bit was a cover-up. There's never really any, it's been said they were intoxicated, but I think that was it was just a cover-up. There's never any evidence that they were intoxicated. I think, yeah, the government would use, these two white Atlanta cops to do something like this, sure. To do it when they're, to have them drink before it, no. I think they were doing this, this was all on purpose. And there's a lot more evidence besides what I described for why this was a purposeful attempt to murder Tupac at that time. They knew exactly where his hotel room was, despite that he was, in the hotel room under a pseudonym. There was, tons of other evidence, to implicate them in a murder attempt.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you earlier. So according to your timeline, the Quad Studios would be the fifth attack on Tupac's life, correct?
Right. People say it was a random mugging at 11, o'clock at night, but it was in the most well-lit area in the world at night, Times Square. And, these guys, I got the government documents from, that was an affidavit from the doctor that analyzed Tupac right after the shooting. And they described it as, one gun, basically one shot put him down on the ground, and the other two shots went in the back of the skull and out the front of the skull. And in my book, I have a picture of the affidavit from the doctor describing this. In my film, I also have a picture of the affidavit so you can read it yourself. So this was a murder attempt. This wasn't just a random mugging. And I'll just say also, of course, the police, a guard at the Quad Studios said that there was film of this incident. There was film of these guys coming into the lobby, doing this to Tupac, or at least coming into the lobby before they did it. And so the police, the security guard offered the police the film, but they just turned it down and closed the case.
Shortly after the attack at the Quad Studios, Tupac went to prison.
Mm-hmm.
What tactics do you believe are used against a prisoner that is deemed a political threat?
Well, Amnesty International published a report of what they call penal coercion. And penal coercion uses they listed 8 different methods for messing up a prisoner's mind in order to influence them as best you can. And I found evidence of all 8 of those techniques used on Tupac. Just isolation, 24, really basically 23 and a half out of 24 hours a day, complete isolation, and a number of other techniques like that. And they also, I believe, tortured him by doing rectal searches every time someone came and visited him, despite, the guards watching all visits of Tupac, and sticking their gloved fingers up his rectum to torture him, and also threatening him, of course, showing shirts about KKK and threatening him, his life, and doing all kinds of other things to him to mess his mind up. And I think they did that to get him to do what they wanted, sign with Death Row Records in order to get out of prison, convince him that Biggie was trying to kill him and it was behind his shooting. Things like that. And with that, they created, of course, the East Coast versus West Coast rap war. And Kathleen Cleaver, the spokesperson for the National Black Panther Party, told me that they did the same thing with the Black Panthers, created the East Coast versus West Coast rivalry with the Panthers between Afeni Shakur in New York and founder Huey Newton in Oakland. And it led to people's deaths the same way that this led to people's deaths with the East Coast versus West Coast rap war. The thing is, the leading figures they thought were actually behind the deaths of the Panthers were undercover agents inside that infiltrated the Panthers. And I argue with the rap war, best evidence is that U.S. intelligence is behind some of these murders and not other rappers.
Once again, this is J-Mix here, and I want to thank everybody out there on the internet that's listening. Shout out to TupacNation.net, DubCC, and BombFirst.com. Real recognize real, and I'll catch everybody on the next upload. Keep it locked right here, more exclusives to come. One love, everybody.
A J-Mix exclusive.
What up, shut up.